Let's start here on the Neustar homepage. Now, I am logged in as a registered user, and if you'll notice, my profile is a super user, and so I have access. If you'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a menu, and if I expand the menu, I have managed users, which will be a list of the registered users, and then I have pending email verifications. I'm going to go ahead and click on Manage Users. You'll notice there's a list of user profiles here. If I wanted to invite any new users, there is an invite button. So if I click on that, I just need to enter an email address, click OK, and then I'll need to populate all of the required fields that are designated with red asterisks. I'll need to select UOC for Universal Order Connect, and then for user roles, these are the different options that you have available. So if this profile needs to be a marketplace super user, I can make that selection and then update, just as an example, and then send the invite. If I needed to make any edits to any of these existing profiles, there's an actions column. And if I click in the actions column, I have the option to edit the user, edit the email or username, or delete users. So these would be the registered users. The pending email verifications, these would be users that have not completed their registration. So they were sent an invite, but for one reason or another, they didn't click on the link and log in and create their password. So it's not finalized. And in this scenario, I have, when I click on pending email verifications, it gives me a list of these pending profiles. And under the actions column, I have the option to resend the email or delete. So let's say that I made a mistake in the username, so the email address is incorrect, so I could just delete it. So that's only for users that have access to it. It's not for every user, just if you're a super user with admin privileges. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the home screen, and we are going to discuss Universal Order Connect. If you're currently using Order Insights, that won't change. If you'll notice for my profile, when I hover over it, I don't have access to it, so it doesn't allow me to interact with it. OMS Analytics is where you would do reporting, and my profile also does not have access to that. I'm going to go ahead and click on Universal Order Connect. And it is going to navigate me to the work queue. So if you'll notice in this black banner, we have create order, search order, work queue, admin, end user, bulk upload, and preferences. We're going to start. I want to jump in and go ahead and create an order, but before I do that, I need to discuss a couple of things. So if you are a super user and have access to this admin tab, I need to click on this and show one of the highlights here or key points is the email notification setting. So if I select admin, I have 3 drop-down menus here. We want to go to preference management. And then I have 4 options under that: configuration, custom status groupings, master settings and notifications, and screen. We want to go to master settings and notifications. And then in this dropdown, I have different options, and we want response email notification. So if I click on response email notification, there are currently 2 emails set up for certain response types, service types, activities, and supplements. If I needed to delete these, there's under the action column a little trash can, and so I can delete. If I needed to add any, I just hover over the plus symbol and it says add response email notification. So I can just select that, and then I can populate the fields as needed. So if I just wanted to do select all for each of these columns, and then enter an email address and save. and it's been successfully updated. Now, when I actually go in and populate the order creation, you're going to notice that there are numerous points of contact. And instead of manually entering those, which is an option, it's always an option to enter fields manually, but we can pre-fill some of these. So if I go to bill and contact, so again, I'm under admin, and under the order enrichment management dropdown menu, I have bill and contact. And so for my profile, I currently have these 5 points of contact configured. And if I needed to add any additional people, I can just click on the plus and add new contact and then populate the required fields. So these 5 points of contact will be available from a drop-down menu when I'm actually creating an order instead of having to manually populate that. Additionally, you'll notice that there is an end user tab here. If I click on that end user and then select from the drop-down, these are end users that have been previously entered in orders. And so once I manually enter it, it saves it, and then I can, going forward, just select it from a drop-down menu instead of having to manually populate it. So if I click on this Cox Corporation, this end user, it has an end user ID, and then currently it only has one site. So I have a site ID and I have a physical address at 255 Southwest 40th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. If I needed to add an additional site, I can add new address. And then so the Cox Corporation will be available from a drop-down menu, and then I could have multiple site addresses or site IDs for each end user. And that'll make more sense once we actually go to the order creation. Now we're going to go ahead and click on create order. And first product that I am going to enter is a dedicated internet order. And I want to share this example. So this is just a Cox order sheet for wholesale optical internet. This is not required. This is just as an example, just for reference. So if we go ahead and take a look at this order form, so this is a new install. I've got my purchase order number. I've got my CCNA information here. If we scroll down, we'll see that this is a tax exempt, a federally tax exempt order. I've got some remarks here about the demarc on the second floor. I also have my MRC, NRC information listed here. Then if I scroll to the bottom, so here's my end user location information, and you'll notice the check mark here. Oh, well, also this is a 36-month term. This is at 255 Southwest 40th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. I have my interface is a 1 gig Ethernet copper, and it has my NCI, SCC NCI codes here listed on this form. And there's also my 100 meg IRRJ code for my NC code. And then if I scroll down, this is an IPv4. So using this form, again, which is not a required form or anything, I'm going to enter this into the portal. Okay, so select product name. This is going to be UOC Dedicated Internet. My activity is going to be a new install. Okay, now the idea that what we're going to do here is any field that has a red asterisk is a required field, but it's the minimum required fields. There will be other fields that are required, and it isn't always clear exactly what fields are required sometimes. And so we'll populate as best we can. We'll scroll back to the top, we'll validate, and it will tell us if we have any errors. If there's anything that we need to populate, we'll click on the error and then navigate to the field and complete our population there. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on customer carrier abbreviation name from the dropdown, and I just need to select my CYF for my organization. Desired due date, this one was April 14th. My purchase order number would be on my documentation. Response type, it's defaulted to F for send FOC only. I want to change that to S. You'll notice there's multiple options in here, send FOC and DLR. It's an existing account number, Inter-Exchange Customer Service Center. I just need to select from the dropdown, CC30. And that's all that's required in this first section. Now, there is not a designated MRC NRC field. And I also had some remarks on my order form. We're going to put that in this remarks section in the ASR administrative section. So I'm just copying and pasting that information. So my MRC, NRC, and then the DMARC remark right there. So we're just, so there's not a designated field, so we're just going to populate that in that section. So that's everything in the ASR section. So we're going to scroll down to the ASR bill section. Now, I also wanted to mention that sometimes we may not completely understand what the field is. So if you click on the title, it does open up a window and give explanation about what activities require this field and some description about what we should put in the field, what the rules are. And so that can be helpful. But here, the access customer name abbreviation, I just need to click on it, select it. This was an exempt order, and it was federally exempt. The term agreement was 36 months, but I'm going to intentionally leave this blank to trigger an error, so it'll remind us that I need to populate that term agreement. Term agreement indicator, if I click on it, it gives me A, B, or C. Well, I'm not sure which one to select. So if I click on the title, it tells me that A is for a new variable term agreement. I'm going to go ahead and select A. And I believe that is everything except for the term agreement that is required in the ASR bill section. Next, I need to just select the JACK status. This was a new DMARC. And the dedicated internet circuit details, I just needed to select IPv4. And that brings us to the NC, NCI, SEC, NCI code. So I'm going to make my selections here. Now, it gives me two options here, dark fiber or wholesale optical internet. And if I go to the connector type, it gives me numerous options here. So as I make selections, it'll narrow the options. So eventually I'll only have one option in the connector type. I'm going to select wholesale optical internet. Speed, this was 100 meg. Wires, 8 wire. Interface type was 1000 base T internet. Now, you'll notice it auto-populated these codes for me. My NC, NCI, SEC, NCI code. I just need to verify that that is correct. So if I go back to reference this document here, I had my IRRJ code here, my NCI code, my SEC, NCI code. So these are correct. If it was incorrect, I can manually change these. So if this was a different product that required a different SEC and CI code, I can manually change those. But in this example, these are correct. Handoff, electrical, and then my connector type, I just have the one option, RJ45 at this point. So that's everything required in this field and in this section. I verified that these codes are correct. And now I'm going to go to my billing section, contact information. Now this is where I had showed you earlier under the admin tab, these points of contact are already entered into the system. And so I just need to select them and it'll auto-populate. Now I'll go to the requested by, and here are all 5 of my contacts. And I'm just going to select Jane Doe. It'll auto-populate the name and telephone number, my buyer contact information, buyer implementation contact. And so I've populated all the points of contact, and but I could manually enter that as well. I don't have to do it from the dropdown. And that brings us to the end user primary location. So again, anything with a red asterisk is a required field. And if it's the first time that you've been here, you will not have anything in this drop-down menu. You'll need to manually enter from the beginning. So you'll manually enter instead of using a drop-down. You'll manually enter the end user ID and the site ID and physical information and contact information. Since I've already entered some of these, I can go ahead and select Cox Corporation. It'll auto-populate my end user ID, my address. I just have the 255 Southwest 40th Street. It has the assigned ID number and all of the contact information. So that made it really simple. And towards the bottom, this is where I would add any attachments. So I can choose a document and select what type it is. And let's say this was our purchase order. We can add a description and then upload. And now that attachment is available to anyone who has access to the portal once this is submitted. So now I could scroll to the top, or I could use the button, this scroll to top feature. Takes me back to the top. And now I'm going to validate and see if I have any errors. And it says the VTA code is not supported by you. So if I click on the error, it takes me directly to the field. If I have some confusion about what term agreement is, I can click on it and it'll give me a description of it. And this was a 36-month term agreement. I'm going to go ahead and scroll back to the top, validate once more. Validation is successful, and now I can submit. Now that I have submitted this, it'll be in my work queue. And it's listed right here. And I could, if I needed to enter another similar order, if I go to the action column, I can simply clone this order. So you'll notice it'll auto-populate most of the information. So it's a UOC dedicated internet. It's a new install. And I'll just need to populate the desired due date and the pawn, but every other field, even the remarks, carry over. So I don't need to populate all those fields again. So I've got my jack status, my IPv4. If this is all still valid for this order, I can leave it as is, or I can edit that. Contact information is all populated, and then I could clear the end user and add another one manually, or select another one from the dropdown if they've already been populated. One thing that does not carry over would be the attachments. So there are no documents listed here. So I would just populate those fields, validate, and submit, and it'd be much quicker the second time around. Now the order that I am going to create, I'm going to share with you. It's going to be a wave order. So again, this is not a required document. This is just an example of an order that I'm going to manually enter. So instead of submitting this form to Cox, I'm going to be entering it into the portal. And so this is a wavelength DWDM. It's a new install. I've got my purchase order number, my CCNA information. This is a federally exempt order. I've got my MRC, NRC information listed down here. There's also some remarks about this being a government-related order. And if I scroll to the bottom, shows that this is a 10 gig wavelength. So KGL is the code. It has my side A location information, my silly code, 24-month term. It has my side side interface information that this is a 1 gig, and so I have my NCI protected codes, and then my Z side, I have my physical site information, my silly code, and then the SEC NCI code and SEC NCI protected codes. So all of those codes are listed here. So this is the order that I'm going to manually enter. Move this to the side. Okay, so we're going to select from the drop-down menu. This will be a UOC End User Special Access. Under Activity, this was a new install. You'll notice there are multiple options here. We're going to select Install. And then on this form, every field that has a red asterisk is a required field, but that is just the minimum required. There are going to be other fields that are required, and it's not always clear. So we'll populate what is required and what I know to be required, and then we'll validate. And it'll tell us if there are any fields that we still need to populate or that violate their rules or anything like that. And we'll go through the process of clearing any errors. And then once we do that, then we'll be able to submit this order. Now, many of these fields, if I am confused about what is asked, what information is supposed to be entered into the field, I can click on the title, and this window will pop up, and so it'll give an explanation of when this field is required and what the rules are about the information that we need to enter. So that can be very helpful. But a lot of this is just going to be from the drop-down menu. So for my customer carrier name abbreviation, I just need to select CYF. Purchase order number, that would be on my documentation. The Interexchange Customer Service Center, I need to select that. My requested due date, I just need to click on that in the calendar, 12. I'm okay with the response type that it's defaulted to. And so that's everything that's required. Now, there is no designated MRC, NRC field. So I am going to go ahead and copy that along with my remarks from my documentation, and I'm going to post that here. So I've got my MRC, NRC information, and then the remark about this being a related order. And that'll all be under the ASR administrative section. So I'm just going to populate that there. That's everything in the ASR section. I'm going to scroll down to the ASR bill section, and I just need to select from the menu here. This was exempt, federally exempt. Term agreement, I'm going to leave blank to trigger an error. This was a 24-month term, but I'm going to intentionally leave that blank. Term agreement indicator, when I click on that, it shows me A, B, or C are my options. Again, if I am not clear what those mean, I can click on the title and it tells me that A is for a new variable term agreement. So I'm going to go ahead and select A from the drop-down menu. And that is all that is required there. Now we're going to navigate to the EUSA primary location section. EUSA primary location section. Enter E. If it's existing, or I can enter my silly code for my documentation. So that's my primary location. And then the surcharge, I put A30 surcharge status. And that's all I need to enter in the EUSA primary location. I need to go to the secondary location section here, and I'm going to enter my silly code. And then my surcharge status is also A30. Okay, so that's everything that's required in those fields. So next we're going to go to the NC, NCI, SEC, NCI section. So I just need to enter my NC code, and it is not listed in this drop-down menu, but from my documentation, it was KGL hyphen. My NCI code was 02LNF A02. So that is selectable in the drop-down menu. And then SEC NCI code is 4LNF.A02. So that is not in this drop-down menu, so I'll need to manually enter that. 04LNF.A02. So that's on my documentation. That is all that's required there. Okay. So now our billing information. And as I had shared previously, these are the points of contact that were entered under the billing section on the admin tab. So I can just select biller, or I could manually enter this if it's different. But if I select from the drop-down menu, it'll auto-populate all the relevant fields requested by. Again, these are the 5 points of contact that I had entered. But again, I could manually enter this as well if it needs to be different. Okay, so I've got those populated. Now that brings us to the end user primary location. So if this is the first time that you've been here, then there will not be anything in your drop-down menu. You'll have to manually enter the end user information. And as you enter that and the end user ID, when we submit it, then it'll be added to the drop-down menu for if you were to do any other orders. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and just select Cox Corporation and select 255. My secondary location, select end user, and this site. And I believe that's all I need to populate. And then down towards the bottom, we have a document section, and this is where we can add attachments. So I can just select an attachment, give it a title. So this is a purchase order, and then I can upload it. So now that document is viewable once we submit this to anyone in the portal. So I believe I've filled out all the relevant information, so I'm going to go ahead and select validate. And it gave me this error code. The VTA code is not a supported value. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to show that I neglected to populate the term agreement. And if there was any confusion, I can click on the title and it'll give the description. I'll go ahead and close that. I'm going to put in my 36-month term. Scroll back to the top, validate once more, make sure that it is clear. And validation is successful, so now I can submit this order. Okay, now that it's been successfully submitted, I can go to my work queue and I can view this pawn. So it's listed right here. And if I needed to do another order, instead of going through that manual method, I can select from the action column, clone. And so I can clone that order now. So I have UOC end user special access. It's a new install, and it's going to auto-populate most of the information. I'll need to have a new unique pawn, the requested due date, the remarks carry over, the Neustar bill section is already populated. So I just need to edit any information that's different, such as the silly codes, the end user information. One other thing that doesn't carry over is the attachments don't carry over. But I would just edit the fields that are unique, validate, and submit, and it's a much quicker process to clone. And I am going to enter a switched Ethernet combo order. And so I'm going to share this order form. So this is not a required form or anything. This is what we would have submitted in the past to Cox, would be a form similar to this. Now we'll, instead of using this form, we'll just be entering it manually in the portal. But I just want to share this information. This is my example. So this is a switched Ethernet combo. This is a new install. I have my purchase order number, which I'll be using something different. My CCNA is listed here. This is federally exempt. I have some remarks here about the master service agreement. I have my MRC, NRC listed. And if I scroll down, here's my ENNI information. So I have my existing NNI information. You'll notice the codes down here. I have 1 gig Ethernet fiber. So my NC code, my NCI, SEC NCI code. So there are my codes that I'll be entering. Got a requested due date. Here's my address for my end user location. This is a 12-month term. And my uni information. So I've got 1 gig Ethernet copper. So I have NC, NCI, SEC, NCI codes listed. And then my EVC information, priority data, EVPL. Then it shows my codes related to that. So this is the order that I'll be manually entering into the portal. So the first thing I need to select from the drop-down menu is the product name. So this one we're going to do switched Ethernet combo. Activity is going to be a new install. Okay, so What we'll be doing is populating every field with a red asterisk. Those are designated as required fields, but they are the minimal required fields. There will be other fields that are required as well. It just depends on the product. And it's sometimes a little unclear. So we'll populate what we believe to be everything that is required, and then we'll validate, and it will tell us if there are any errors, if there are any fields that we skipped, or any fields, the information that we entered violated any rules or anything. So we'll click on those and then correct any errors, and then we'll submit the order. Now, if I have any confusion about what any of these fields are, like customer carrier name abbreviation, if I click on that title, it gives me a description when it's required and what the rules are to populate that field. So that can be very helpful. A lot of these are just going to be drop down, and so I can just select CYF. Purchase order number is going to be my unique number here. Interexchange Customer Service Center, CC30. Requested due date, I'm going to put the 31st of March. Requested response type, it's defaulted to F, but I'm going to change that to S for send, FOC, and DLR. And everything else is good. I don't need to edit any of these other fields. I do need to put, there's not a designated MRC NRC field, so we are going to put that here in this remarks section. And if there were any other related remarks that were important, we could put those here in this remarks field in the ASR administrative section. But after that, that's all that I need to populate there. So I'm going to move down to the ASR bill section, and I just need to select from the drop down CYF. This was exempt. My tax exemption was federal. Term agreement, I'm going to intentionally leave this blank. It was a 12-month term, but I'm going to leave that blank to trigger an error so I can show that process. Term agreement indicator. When I click on that field, it just lists A, B, and C. Well, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to put. So I could click on the term agreement indicator description here, and it says when it's required, and it tells me that A is for a new variable term agreement. So A is what I will select. Okay, that's everything except for that term agreement, which we will come back to. So now I need to go to the EVC details section. My network channel code, I just need to populate that. DLP hyphen. And then uni details section 1. Okay, so I just need to change this to a 1. So my user network interface activity indicator, I'm going to select N for new. ENI indicator here. Y indicates that it is an ENNI. Network channel interface code. So I'm taking this from my documentation and I'm pasting that code in here. And then my related UNI identifier. So my circuit ID from my documentation. So there's my circuit ID. Okay, so that's everything in the uni detail section 1. So now we need to migrate to the level of service detail section 1 right here. And I just need to select N for new. Level of service was priority data, and my bandwidth was 100 meg. Okay, so that's everything that I need to populate there. So next we're going to go to the uni detail section 2. 02, in for new. I have my network channel interface code. It's a required field. I've pasted my code for my documentation. So that's everything in this section. So now I need to go to the level of service detail section 1 of the section 2 here. Select in for new, priority data, and 100 meg. Okay, so that's everything in that section. So now we're going to go to the NC, NCI, SEC, NCI section right here. And you'll notice that as I populate the fields, it'll start to restrict the options like for connector type and handoff type. So I need to select uni. My speed is gig E. My interface type is 1000 base TX. Co-located, no. Now, as soon as I did that, you'll notice it auto-populated the NC, NCI, and SEC NCI code. So it did that automatically. I didn't have to populate that. I just need to go back to my documentation and verify that those are correct. And if I go back and look, KFE was my NC code. So I just need to edit that. But it looks like my other codes, my NCI code is correct. And my SEC NCI code are correct. So those are correct. I need to select my handoff type and my connector type, and you'll notice I just have the one option left there. And it changes this. So I should have finished populating these fields before I went and manually edited that. Okay, so we're good there. Now, as I had mentioned before on the admin tab, the points of contact for billing and all that data entry points of contact, those are auto-populated here. So I can just select them from a drop-down menu, or I could manually enter them if I needed to. But in this example, I'm just going to select from my predetermined points of contact. So here are all 5 of them. And I can just select from the drop-down. But again, you can manually enter it if you need to. Populated those. Now that brings us to our end user primary location. So if this is the first time that you've ever gone here, there will not be any end users in a list. So I would need to manually enter that information. So I'd need to manually enter the end user ID, and then the site ID number, and then the physical address and contact information. But after I enter that manually the first time and then submit it, it'll be available from a drop-down list, so I can reuse it. In this example, I'm going to go ahead and use Cox Corporation. It auto-populates the end user ID, and from the address, there's just one site, 255 Southwest 40th Street in Lincoln, and it'll auto-populate all of that contact information. That is it for end user primary location. Then I can go to my documents section, and if I needed to attach any files, just select it, give it a title, purchase order, and then upload. And now that document is available. Once I submit this order, it'll be available for anyone who has access to the portal. I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the top using the scroll to top button, and I'm going to validate. And it did give me this error right here for the VTA code not supported. If I click on it, it takes me right to that field that I need to populate. If I had any question about what they're asking for, I can click on the title. And this was my 12-month term. Go back to the top, validate. Validation is successful. And so now I can submit this order. And it shows that it has been successfully submitted. So now we can migrate from the Create Order tab and go back to the Work queue. And you'll notice this is the pawn that we just created. So if I need to enter another order, instead of doing all of that manually, if it's very similar, I can go ahead and select this and just clone this install. And so it has the UOC switched Ethernet combo. It's a install activity, and I just need to have a new pawn and the requested due date, but everything else carries over. So my remarks, my ASR bill section, my uni details section, I'd probably need to edit the circuit ID, my level of service detail, all of those fields are carried over my NCI code. So if anything I need to change or verify, I can do that. I can edit the billing contact information, my end user primary location, can enter a new one. And then the only thing that doesn't really carry over is the attachments. Those are not carried over. So it'd be the same process. I would validate, correct any errors, and then submit. But that would be it. So now I'm going to go back to the work queue. And as soon as they are sent, I have access to do SUPs. So let's go ahead and talk about SUPs for a second. So we have the 4 supplement types. So a SUP 1 is if an order needs to be canceled. SUP 2 is a desired due date change. SUP 3 is an order that has been confirmed. So it has a confirmed status and we want to make a change. And then a SUP 4 is a pre-FOC change. So it has not been confirmed yet. So it's just a sent status. So I'll go through these. So let's go ahead and go back to our work queue. And I'm just gonna, now I do want to talk also about the view here. So we're looking at status groupings, everything that's open, and it shows there's 249 total records. If I clear the status grouping and select refine by, it increases it to 278. So it's just pretty much everything. And if this is the first time that you've been in here and they've migrated a lot of older orders, you may need to scroll to the bottom and edit your due date. So mine goes back a year. So you may want to, if you can't find something, you may need to edit your view. You can also create custom searches. So if I select manage search, you could change whatever, let's say we just wanted to have disconnects, and I could save that as a search. And then when I select my save searches, I have different options here that I could use. So that being said, if now we wanted to cancel one of these orders, so a SUP 1, so I would just click on the pawn. So I can view here what's going on. But under the more actions option, this is where I would cancel the order. So I select cancel order, and then I just need to give a remark why I want to cancel it. So that's a SUP 1. A SUP 2 would be a due date change. So just on the same pawn, I can go to the request due date. So it's currently on the 31st. I want to move that to the 29th. I just need to validate. Validation is successful, and then submit. Pawn has been successfully submitted. Now, you'll notice there's also a new tab here, a SUP compare. So if I select that, it shows I have version 1 and version 2. So this was version 1 was 331, version 2 is 329. That's a SUP 2. If I wanted to do a SUP 3, it would just need to be in complete status. So you have these different columns. I can go to UOC status. You can, obviously search by the pawn, but I'm going to do by complete. And particular one I'm looking for, I could go here, and then if I needed to change the bandwidth, then I could do that. That would be a SUP 3. But let's do a SUP 4 on a sent order. So let's go to this one. I want to do a SUP 4 on this install. So it's on the 14th, and I just want to change it. Actually, it wasn't this one. Trying to find. Let's just go ahead and do it on this order. So I'm going to change the bandwidth. So it's 100 meg. I'm going to change it to 50 meg. Validate. Validation successful, and submit. So this is a SUP 4. And if I go to SUP compare, so this was the same pawn that I did the due date change on. So now we have a version 2 where it was 100 meg and version 3 where it's 50 meg. There's also the option for user override. So if I click on this pawn, you'll notice over here we have the details, the order summary, and I have the option for user override. So instead of UOC dictating, we could change it. We can do an override. I just need to enter the version that the 2-digit version number. That's your user override. So next, let's talk about disconnects. So to do a disconnect, obviously it's going to need to be a complete order. So I'm going to find a pawn that is complete. If I can spell it correctly. Second page here, and this is the specific. Now I could click on the action drop down menu, and I have a disconnect order here. So I could just click that, or I could open the pawn and go to more actions. And there's also the option to disconnect order. It's the exact same process, just if you wanted to verify by clicking it open. I can select disconnect order. It'll take me to this page. I just need to select the newest instance, select create. And then it's just a matter of entering the desired due date and the pawn, validating and submitting. That's all you have to do. If it's already in here, the order's already in the portal, then you can just disconnect it. Let's say that it is not in here. I cannot find the pawn. It hasn't been migrated over, or it doesn't exist in the UOC marketplace. Then I can create a disconnect order from scratch. So to create a disconnect order from scratch, I would go to the create order tab and then dedicated internet in this example, whatever the product is. And then instead of selecting install, we could select disconnect. And then it's just a matter of populating the fields and validating and make sure it's correct and then submitting. The only thing that would, let's go ahead and, I could go ahead and do this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and populate this as a disconnect order. So I'm just going to populate the required fields. I need my circuit ID. Populate that for my documentation. This was exempt. And again, just make sure that these codes that auto-populated are correct. If not, I can manually correct those. And then I'm just using my pre-filled contact information. And then my end user ID and my site information. And then let's validate and see if I missed anything. I did not. And so now I can submit it. So that was a disconnect order from scratch. Now we can also go back to the work queue and we can clone a disconnect order. So I have this one that I just created that I just sent, and I have the ability to clone. So now I don't have to populate as many fields. It's going to auto-populate a lot of it. So I just need to have my pawn, my desired due date, and my circuit ID is probably going to be different, I would assume. And then, edit any other relevant information that would be different. So that would be cloning a disconnect order. Now the next would be a change order. So it just would need to be for a completed order, and it's going to be the kind of the same process. So if I had a change order in here, I can clone it. So if I selected it, so if I wanted to view this, and this was a demarked, no, this, yeah. If we needed to make any changes, if it was an inside move, an outside move, if it was a change of service level, whatever we would want to do, we could clone an existing order, or if we needed to create one from scratch, we would go to create order, and whatever the product is, I'm just using dedicated internet as an example, and instead of install or disconnect, we would just select change. And then we would populate the order according to whatever the services we want them to have. So if it was they currently have 100 meg and we wanted to change it to 50 meg, we would just populate this form for a 50 meg service rather than 100 meg. That would be for completed orders to do changes. Now we talked about admin, end user. There's also the option to do bulk uploads. So if I click on bulk upload, there is a README document here that talks about some of the formatting and the features, some screenshots. But there is essentially everything that you saw me populate, you can do that in a spreadsheet. There's a standard template right here that you can download. You would just want to make sure that you selected the UOC Universal, and just depend on what product it is that you're wanting to enter, and then export. And then you would just populate the fields in the template, and then you can upload it. You can go to search bulk orders and search. And so these are all the bulk uploads that have been uploaded on this account. And if there are any errors, you can actually download it and correct the errors. So it's essentially validating it when you upload it. So if it has errors, this only has 2 examples in here, but if you scroll all the way to the end, it's going to tell us what our errors are, and it says for this one, secondary end user not found for given end user ID. So. Then there's also preferences, and this would be for user preferences, that you can edit these screens, especially the work list. So there are all these columns, and instead of having to scroll horizontally to find like the activity, let's say that you want activity to be listed, when you log in or when you navigate to the work screen. So you can select that and move it up in the order, or move it down, and then just save it. And you can do that for multiple screens. You can also edit the fill color and font color for the statuses, and that's just for your user profile. You can just save that.